Dynasty Corner! Welcome in, Brainiacs. Today, the Fantasy Brains bring to you an extra special episode. Today, we've got debuting on the podcast because our old friend Matthew Cahan is gone. He's off venturing out in Japan, graduating. He's on some big stuff right now. But coming on, not even filling in, but joining us today is my friend Gabriel Sisarica, who's going to be a major part of this podcast in the future. Gabe, before I let you say anything, I just want to make sure that the listeners know to go check us out on all our social medias at LeatherBrainz on X, YouTube, Spotify. Make sure you follow and subscribe. Gabe, what's going on, man? I feel like you've been up to a lot lately, too.
Yes, Charlie, it's so good to be here. I'm very excited to be a part of this podcast and to work with LeatherBrainz moving forward. Yeah, man, a lot going on. You know, we're all graduating college. Things are good. Life keeps moving. But I'm definitely excited to be here.
All right. Today we are going to be talking about the NFL Draft veteran winners and losers. I've got two winners. Gabe's got two winners. We've each got two losers. We're going to talk through them all because we got to understand kind of the landscape of the NFL Draft and what it does to these players that are already in the league. We've been talking rookies nonstop. I mean, everybody loves talking rookies. It's so much fun getting into everything that they're going to be in the NFL. But what we can predict even better is how they will affect these veteran players that are already in the league. So let's get right into it. My first winner of the NFL Draft is going to be Chris Olave. And this is pretty simple when it comes down to it. They did not draft any wide receivers, the New Orleans Saints, which to me, that signifies that they truly believe that he is a wide receiver one and their wide receiver one. They drafted a second round quarterback, so we've got a little bit more opportunity between Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shugg to be to have a credible quarterback. And that's really been Chris Olave's main problem so far is Derek Carr is a Chris Olave hater. He's ridiculous. The way that Derek Carr did not throw Chris Olave the ball was disgusting for the beginning of his career. And we were all just praying for Derek Carr to leave. Now he's gone and we can see what Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shugg have to offer. What do you think about Chris Olave and his fantasy impact next season?
I'm someone who's kind of almost indifferent about Olave. I think everything you said so far is pretty accurate. And Derek Carr, when he wasn't throwing it, or even when he was throwing it to Olave, kept getting him injured anyways. So it's really kind of a lose-lose. And man, that Saints depth chart is really bleak. And we're talking about Shaheed, who's coming off a serious injury. We're talking about Cooks, who's been in the NFL for so long. It's like, okay, Olave really is that only option. My only concern about the Saints is their quarterback play is still looking pretty dire. I mean,
that's the thing.
We'll see if Rattler can come in again in year two. I think he's going to be their starter and kind of make some improvements on what we saw from last season. But either way, I mean, I'm not super excited about Olave's quarterbacks. I just think the thing that's working out for him is he is like the clear wide receiver one on this team. And that could be enough to have a lot of, pretty productive weeks for Olave. But I don't think he's that, top like 12 to 15 guy that people want him to be. I think more like that 20-25 range in PPR formats is probably what managers can expect from Olave moving forward.
It's going to be tough for Olave to, explode out of his ceiling and really produce high-level fantasy points because their offense is not going to be good. Like the Saints are going to suck this year. They're going to be really bad, I would imagine. They're probably going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. But make no mistake about it, we've seen good wide receivers on bad teams because there's going to be offensive output. I would be shocked if the Saints, their quarterbacks combined, don't throw for, at least 2,750 yards. They're going to be above that. Yep. And so the thing is Olave with this depth chart, like you mentioned, Shaheed, Brandon Cooks, nobody else. They have a bunch of nobodies. He's probably going to be getting, a 25% plus target share. He's going to be getting a big amount of those yards. He might fall shorter on the touchdowns because those might go more Shaheed, Cooks, Kamara. Mm-hmm. And Kamara is obviously always there who's going to eat up a lot of targets. But I think Olave is in a prime position to just get everything in this offense, whatever it is. And I mean, that's to me screams winner from the draft, even though he's still probably, like you said, doesn't have that top 10 upside.
Yeah, I think of someone like Brian Thomas or Malik Neighbors, two guys who played on offenses last season that really struggled, and had quarterbacks that were had pretty
Right.
seasons, and they overproduced in fantasy. I mean, they were some of the two of the top five PPR guys in all of the NFL. I'm not saying Olave is going to give you that, but I definitely think that, I mean, he's going to catch passes, and like you said, they're going to have to throw the football. So yeah, I like this take, Charlie.
It's the injuries though for Olave, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that's the problem is he's been concussed over and over again,
Yeah.
and we don't know how much he's going to be able to stay on the field.
Absolutely. And I mean, if he can stay on the field, like you said, I mean, he's shown he's a very relevant NFL wide receiver. But those injuries are scary, especially those head injuries. I mean, one or two more concussions and he's out of the NFL entirely. That's something that is
Right.
concerning.
I think in like dynasty formats, the way to go about someone like Chris Olave is you want to use the first weeks of the NFL season, 3, 4 weeks when he is the only guy in their offense, he's producing, and then sell him off, trade him, get rid of the injury risk, get rid of because if they bring in a new wide receiver eventually, like it's gonna just drop in production for Olave in the future. But I think for redraft, that's a great wide receiver two to have on your team. If you can get Chris Olave as your wide receiver two, I'm pretty damn happy.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think for me moving forward, my first winner immediately was Chase Brown, running back for the
Yeah.
Cincinnati Bengals. Brown is someone who is near and dear to my heart, as well as Charlie's, University of Illinois alum, but also someone that I drafted in a dynasty league of mine, and I've held on to him since I drafted him. And last season, he proved that he can really play. And the Bengals were looking at Zach Moss, and then we're talking about replacing somebody, and it was just a little bit of a concern for Brown on what the Bengals were exactly going to do. But now that the draft is over, I think Brown is in a very healthy situation. The Bengals went and drafted Taj Brooks from Texas Tech in the sixth round, which is, their running back. They're adding depth, and he's a similar guy in the aspect of like a late round pick, like Brown was. Who knows what can
He's
happen?
not gonna do much.
But
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. I don't think he's really going to come in and be anything more than a potential third down guy, someone who's going to pass protect. Really not someone who I'm concerned about Brown. And let's talk about Chase Brown for a second, Charlie, just how good he was at the end of last season. Um,
Mhm.
he came in and was the RB3 in receiving yards, just behind Achan and Gibbs. He was the RB3 in points per game from week 9 on, and he had the most expected fantasy points out of any running back in that span. Chase Brown wasn't just good, he was an elite RB1 in what is an elite offense in Cincinnati. So I'm really excited about Brown's outlook looking forward this season.
I mean, Gabe, Chase Brown is the winner of the NFL draft. Like he is the winner because this offense is already the best offense in the NFL. I mean, you have Joe Burrow, you're going to have both tons of passing yards, tons of rushing yards, good game script for Chase Brown. There is no stopping Chase Brown this year, and I'm really excited. I've been looking into statting out all these players and these teams based on their offensive production that Kahan and I will think they're going to have. And in my preliminary go rounds with Chase Brown is I think he's going to end up, just under 1,000 yards rushing because Zach Moss is still there, probably going to take away some of the rushing yards. But then I still think Chase Brown is going to have almost 10 touchdowns on the season. He's probably going to have almost 400 receiving yards as well because there's just so, like, even though there's so many people to feed, you've got Jamar, you've got T. Higgins, it really isn't all that difficult to get all these guys the ball when they have so much to go around. I mean, Joe Burrow is going to be passing for over 4,000 yards. It's going to be an incredible season for the Bengals. I want to ask you about their defense. What do you think if their defense gets better, do you think that like hurts Chase Brown or do you think that could even help him more because they can pass less at that point?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I think Brown works really well in open space, and I've seen him break out some big runs last season too when he played a ton. And he's a really explosive player once he gets into the field. I don't think I'd love it if those games um, are a lot of handing it off to Brown. I like when
We want high scoring
yeah, when the
for
Cincinnati
sure.
Bengals offense is needs to put up 45 points a game to win, they're using Brown more effectively. And teams are expecting to throw so much that then it opens up some room for Brown in the running game because teams are expecting that pass over and over again. When I when I envision closer Bengals games where It's slower pace. I don't think that bodes well for Chase Brown. Obviously, the defense is going to be a little bit better this season because how could they be really
Has
any
to be.
worse? But
Yeah.
I like it when the Bengals are slinging the ball and are really kind of playing catch up. I think Brown gets a ton of value getting 4 to 6 receptions a game versus rushing for maybe 100, 120 yards. I think those receptions really kind of puts Brown ahead of a lot of running backs who might be a little bit more talented in the running game.
I mean, it's no hate to Zach Moss. He's probably still going to be involved in their offense, but it is certainly Chase Brown as the lead running back now, which was not what we thought going into last year's season. But now that we saw how it played out, like it is all Chase Brown at this point. For my next winner, I want to get into talking about Ricky Pearsall, who I am getting really, really confident in this year. I'm super excited because the 49ers, they didn't draft a wide receiver in the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft. So I am confident Ricky Pearsall, who's a first round NFL draft pick, that he will be in the top 3 wide receivers of their team. I was a little worried that if they were to take another wide receiver because they traded Debo, that it was going to affect Ricky Pearsall's value. But really now trading Debo allows Pearsall to grow into that role and take over more of that role while also being in a better down the field wide receiver than Debo was. So they prioritized defense in the draft, the 49ers, and I think they're going to be really good again. I really trust after seeing Brock Purdy over these few years that I really trust that Brock Purdy is also going to be throwing for around the 4,000-yard range. And when Ricky Pearsall broke out at the end of last year's season, I think the 49ers are going to take that and run with it. And we might see that throughout the entire season next year.
Charlie, I really like this take. I think it's something that's going under the radar with Ricky Pearsall. The 49ers have to have a better
Yeah, baby.
offense than they did last season. There's no question. I mean, they just didn't win the games when they needed it. Their defense was so banged up. But now you have, okay, Ayuk's coming back from this ACL injury. Who knows when he's going to be back? Is he going to be as good? You don't know,
I can't expect him to be better.
right? And he was already having a down season last year compared to
Mm-hmm.
previously. And then George Kittle's getting up there in age. McCaffrey is also getting up there in age. He's been dealing with all these injuries. The 49ers are going to need someone to step up in this offense for the future. And Ricky Pearsall, given that first round draft capital, can absolutely be that guy. And I don't know if you're looking for Juwan Jennings to really be that guy in San Francisco. He kind of came out of nowhere last season, someone who's had
Good.
before. And he's someone you have to look out for. But really, like you said, it looks like the 49ers are trusting Pearsall to break out. And what benefits him the most is Purdy is a proven quarterback at this point, where it's not like you're throwing
Mm-hmm.
him in with some offense who knows what you're going to get out of your quarterback. I think people know what they can expect out of Brock Purdy, and that's good enough for me to be like, hey, Ricky Pearsall could be a guy who really makes some noise this season.
Yeah, it's the McCaffrey and Kittle for me. I'm really not too worried about Juwan. I think Juwan is going to be a really good wide receiver for them too. I would imagine that Pearsall and Juwan Jennings end up finishing, neck and neck in terms of fantasy output, where Brandon Ayuk is going to fall behind a little bit. But what is going to set them apart is Juwan and Ricky could end up being, closer to the top 15, closer to that 15 range of wide receiver if George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey start taking steps back. Now, if they're as involved as ever, we might see Ricky Pearsall fall, as a lower end wide receiver 2 range with Juwan Jennings, which still, I think as a floor is still pretty good for Pearsall.
I agree. I think it is a good floor. And I mean, when you look at it, I mentioned before, like someone has to step into this offense. And Pearsall, even if he's not like exactly where you want it to be this season, everything is kind of pointing in the right direction. That if Pearsall is relatively productive, especially I do like him in the slot, that he's someone that the 49ers can rely on moving forward in years to come. Where if you have him in Dynasty, like this is just like the start. You know what I mean? If he's not exactly what
Mm-hmm.
you want, I would not, overreact if he's had a very mediocre season because changes are happening within this 49ers offense. And you just have to hope that Pearsall isn't a part of those changes and he's someone that really makes noise instead of, backfiring in the other direction.
You're totally right. Give me the next winner that you've got.
Charlie, this is the one that I really like. Another one that I think is kind of going under the radar. It's Evan Engram. Evan Engram is a big time
Okay.
winner. And, when we see it behind you, all the Broncos, Evan Engram moved from the Jacksonville to the Denver Broncos. And the Broncos didn't draft anybody that's going to get in the way of Evan Ingram. And with all due
Anywhere.
respect,
I can't believe it.
right? With all due respect, the Broncos, their offense is a little weak. Cortland Sutton, I would
RJ
say,
Harvey.
yeah, RJ Harvey I like, but Cortland Sutton is a very solid
Dog.
NFL wide receiver. And then, in my humble opinion, you got a whole bunch of nobodies.
Whoa. Marvin Mims, dog.
Evan Ingram is the clear number 2 in Denver, and he's someone that
Marvin Mims is a Pro Bowler. Thank you very much.
Evan Evan Ingram, Evan Ingram. Hear me out, Charlie. Ingram had a down season last year, but so did the Jacksonville Jaguars as a whole. He got injured after week 9, and he's 30 years old. Some of those things are a little bit scary. But the 2 years prior, Evan Ingram was a top 5 fantasy tight end. One of those seasons, he had 114 receptions. He's someone who is a
Yeah.
PPR merchant. And I think a
Mm-hmm.
Sean Payton offense who has proven to be able to get tight ends involved. We're talking about Jimmy Graham and the likes of some great Saints tight ends. And then we're talking about Bo Nix, who had a very solid rookie season, someone who has really proven in just one season that he can throw the football. I think Evan Ingram comes into a very, very favorable situation in Denver. And he's sitting right now around the tight end 10 in redraft formats. I think that's a little bit low. I think he's someone who has top 5 tight end upside, which is why I think he was a bit under the radar. I think Evan Ingram is in a very good situation here in Denver.
Yeah, I mean, you spelled it out perfectly. Without them bringing in any other competition for targets, he's going to get a ton of targets. Like, that is exactly how Sean Payton wants to use him. I don't expect things to go any other way other than to pepper him with targets. I mean, it could go awry if the offense isn't as good or if injuries start to take hold. I mean, they might just not want to involve a tight end as much, but it really does seem like they paid him, they stole him from away from the Chargers, and it really seems like Evan Ingram is poised to have a really good tight end season. It seems like we have a lot of decent tight ends in that range, and I think it's like you said I mean, he's being drafted at tight end 10, and I would say that's probably his floor. Like, if he is not a tight end 1, I would be very, very surprised just by the sheer amount of receptions that he is going to have.
Absolutely. If he's in that like 70 reception range and gets maybe 3 to 4 touchdowns, I mean, he's someone who can do very, very well this season. And like you said, there's not much to worry about. I mean, Bo Nix is going to throw the ball to Cortland Sutton. And then I really think like Evan Ingram is that clear number 2 guy in Denver. But Charlie, let's hear about some losers. We talked a whole lot about some guys who might be successful, but talk to me a little bit about, who you got.
All right, I think a first big loser of this draft is Rhamondre Stevenson from the NFL draft. Now, the New England Patriots drafted Travion Henderson 38th overall, which is a high valued pick. There's a lot of draft capital to that running back. When running backs are selected with high draft capital, it means something, especially for fantasy football. Rhamondre Stevenson was a 4th-round pick, came out as a senior, picked in the 2021 NFL draft. So he's getting up there a little bit. He's on he's had a couple contracts, and he is almost on his last year of his deal. Next year would be his last year, but they could end up releasing him. I would imagine. It depends on how the Travion experiment goes. But I mean, he's a Bill Belichick guy who failed these Patriots late in his career. Bill Belichick did not know how to draft anybody, could not get a team together for these Patriots in his later years. And so Rhamondre has fumbling issues. He has vision issues between the tackle. And the way that I see it is Travion is really, really good at everything that Rhamondre is okay at. You know what Rhamondre is pretty good at? Like outside catching passes and stuff. Travion excels at that. He excels at pass blocking. He's going to get on the field. And then I think at the stuff that Rhamondre is bad at, Travion's still pretty good at. So he might end up taking a lot more of this offense than we really expect.
Yeah, Rhamondre Stevenson was somebody that I saw last season where he started off the season strong, and I was like, okay, I need to get rid of this guy because his time is coming. You know what I mean? And you explained it very well, right? He's getting up there in age, and now the Patriots just drafted a running back very high in the draft, 38th overall. And his most blaring thing for Stevenson is the fumbling problem. Stevenson would come in and rush for 100 yards, and they'd hand him off the ball 25 times, and half the time he was scoring a touchdown. And all those things sound great in fantasy, but he kept fumbling, and he would fumble over and over and over again. Let's say 5 weeks, 3 to 4 times. You're like, oh gosh, this guy's putting up numbers, but he keeps fumbling the football. The Patriots need someone with ball security. And at this point, bringing in Henderson, like you said, is someone who I think excels at a lot of the things that Stevenson's okay at. I mean, it's almost a no-brainer. If you can get any value out of Rhamondre Stevenson now, or if he does well at the beginning of the season, by all means, ship him because he's not in the Patriots' future plans. And Henderson is up next in this Patriots offense, which I believe is getting a lot better. They drafted a good quarterback in Drake May and drafted another wide receiver. They brought in Stephon Diggs. Like, this is an offense that's moving forward, and Stevenson is moving backwards.
Yeah, I love what this offense is doing. I think that it's heading in the exact right direction that it needs to. And Travion is not some random running back. Like, he is a stud running back. He is so good. He probably would have been one of the best running backs in college football this past year had he not been in a shared backfield with Quinshon Judkins. And that's just the way that it goes. But the NFL recognizes talents. The Patriots ended up taking him before the Bears even had a chance to grab him. And Quinshon, his teammate, goes earlier to the Browns, who's probably a better scheme fit. But now, I mean, the Patriots were probably thrilled to see Travion Henderson up at the board. And I think he's going to be a genuine focal point of this offense and that they're going to build around him to score fantasy points.
Absolutely. We've seen teams like Alabama have 4 high caliber starting NFL running backs on their team at the same time. And just because they're sharing time in college does not mean that these guys are not elite talents. And I definitely think that Travion Henderson is an elite talent that can make some noise right away in the NFL. For me, my first loser, and this one really hurt me because the guy I liked a ton going into the season was Jalen McMillan on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. McMillan ended the season as such a deep threat for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Mayfield was slinging the ball and he was trusting him down the field. And he had 5 straight weeks where he finished as a top 20 wide receiver. In an offense where Evans is getting older, in an offense where Godwin was injured, I was like, man, McMillan is the guy. And then Godwin was going into free agency. So I was like, there's no way McMillan isn't a focal point on this offense.
Uh-huh.
And then they drafted a wide receiver 19th overall, and they brought back Godwin. It is like the biggest loss for Jalen McMillan owners that you could possibly imagine because he's not even going to be on the field a lot this season after putting up elite numbers to end the season. It doesn't make any sense to me. But let's look at it from an outside perspective. Okay, let's say Evans has 1 or 2 more seasons. Let's say, Godwin isn't as good after the injury. Obviously, he signed a big extension. But then Buka's going to be in the slot. McMillan is an outside guy, and they have their 2 outside guys. They have their 2 outside guys. And it's like, okay, what did the Bucs even do with McMillan moving forward, Charlie?
Well, I think the way that we have to go about this is the Bucs could not have looked at Jalen McMillan's season and been like, that was bad. We need to find a replacement. Like, we need to shore up our wide receiver room because Jalen McMillan is not the answer. There's no way. There's absolutely no way they looked at him like that. They definitely looked at him and said, wow, we found something in this guy. This is a great member of our team, a great member of our wide receiver core in our locker room. We're going to keep him around. We're going to use him. And then they go out there and make moves that totally disagree with that entire statement of what they think. But the NFL works in mysterious ways, and we have to understand that these NFL execs and these people that are building these teams are trying to curate and build these offenses with an idea in mind of what they're already working with. And so having Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, then maybe they want to say, we have loved Mike Evans and Chris Godwin for the last 10 years in Tampa Bay. We want 10 more years of Jalen McMillan and Emeka Egbuka right after. We want to have a smooth transition so we can throw because that's where they got so much success. They threw in quarterbacks and they just find success. I mean, they got Tom Brady. They won a Super Bowl. Baker Mayfield had a career resurgence. They truly believe that they can win their division year in and year out by having one of the best receiver cores in the NFL. And I don't hate the moves that they're making. I think for Jalen McMillan owners, it might be a little sucky this year, unfortunately, because they still have Evans and Godwin. And I'm not too worried about Egbuka affecting Jalen McMillan because he's going to be a primary slot player and potentially get on the field in other ways. But it is going to be a little rough for McMillan. But I think if you're a McMillan owner, you kind of just have to stick through it at this point to hope that talent can win out, right?
Because he's talented. We saw it last season. Getting rid of him now when his value is low and the fact that you don't even know how much he's going to play what if McMillan is used well in this offense? What if, Igbokwe takes a back seat? What if, Godwin isn't as good? Maybe Evans is slowing down a little bit. Whatever it might be, you got to take this season with a grain of salt, knowing that McMillan is talented and he still has a ton of value in dynasty formats. And, who knows what he'll do
Give
PPR
this
wise.
man one reason to get on the field.
Mm-hmm. And
You know,
say that again?
give this man one reason to get on the field, and then he's going to go off.
Exactly. And then it's going to be too late, right? Once he goes off, especially the way that McMillan plays, where it'll be a big reception. It'll be like a 60-yard touchdown, and then it'll come in next game. And if it gets, another 40-yard reception or multiple 20-yard receptions, he's getting you a ton of yards with a minimal amount of receptions. And Baker Mayfield clearly trusted him last season. So I would hold off a little bit on McMillan, but this is definitely not a, something you need to freak out about it, but it's just kind of the reality this season. It might not be what McMillan owners wanted.
Yeah, Baker honestly kind of worries me a little bit. I mean, we don't know how long he's going to be in Tampa Bay for, and so that I would love if Baker would stay for McMillan's sake, but we might not get to see Baker and McMillan play together much longer.
That's a good point, Charlie.
For my next loser, my last loser, it's Tyrone Tracy on the New York Giants. And what we've kind of been talking about with all these guys, the losers in Dynasty, you probably want to hold on to them. In redraft, you probably don't want to touch them at all with a 10-foot pole. Stay away. But Tyrone Tracy, I really liked him going into the draft, and unfortunately they took a really, really good running back in Cam Scatabo. They drafted Cam Scatabo in the 4th round, which I know we were just talking about Rhamondre being a 4th round running back, but I do think there's a difference between Cam Scatabo being a 4th round running back and Rhamondre Stevenson. In this year's draft class, there was a lot more running backs. We saw guys like Caleb Johnson, who could have been 2nd round talents, go in the 3rd round. RJ Harvey goes in the 2nd round. So it was a deeper class, and I'm confident that Scatabo is going to be able to complement Tyrone Tracy really, really well. I think Tyrone is still going to be involved. He's going to be a primary pass catching option. He's going to be used in the slot potentially if they want to throw Malik Neighbors out wide. And so I think that even though they drafted Scatabo in the 4th round, Tracy's still going to be involved. But the problem is that this offense is just not going to provide enough total fantasy value to bring fantasy production to really either of these running backs. I think Scatabo is going to bring the punishing skill set that demands time on the field, pass blocking. I think he's going to score touchdowns on the goal line. And so it kind of leaves this weird space for Tracy where he could maybe be a pass catching back in between the 20s. And so it's okay, are we going to be seeing, 6 to 7 points a game from him? And it's just not that enticing when we've got, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Jackson Dart as their 3 quarterbacks heading into this year who all aren't going to be check down guys and are going to be looking down the field. And Neighbors takes away all the short targets anyways. So I just really don't see a way that Tyrone Tracy is able to carve out a lot of fantasy production this year.
Yeah, I really don't like Tracy's situation at all. It kind of reminds me of what's going on in Tennessee with Tony Pollard and them at the running back situation, where you take.
I think Tony Pollard's a winner, though, but Tyjae Spears probably got the.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking. It's okay. Tyrone Tracy can give you value, and we saw last season he had over 1,000 yards, but you have to hope that he gives you that value in the receiving game. And Russell Wilson is not a check down quarterback this season. And he's never been that guy in his career. He's not that quarterback who's checking the ball down. And even when you have those receivers like Neighbors, who you talked about, it's going to take up those short targets. It really feels like the Giants saw Tracy's season, who he did very well, and they're just kind of closing him in. They wanted him to focus on a specific skill set. If he excels in that passing game, and that's that skill set that they want, which I envision that it is, then Tracy could definitely still give you value. But you can't deny that Scatabo comes in, and he's someone who's going to ground and pound that football. If Tracy's not on the field, what can you expect out of the guy? You know what I mean? And it's just not a lot of good things going on in New York that really get me excited about Tyrone Tracy, who was a really big steal for dynasty formats last season in the draft.
Right, it looked like that. But Tracy's not a better wide receiver than Wan'Dale Robinson. He's not a better wide receiver than Darius Slayton. And so It's just you're going to put him out there and he might see the field, but I just don't see him seeing a lot of targets. I don't see him seeing a lot of touches, but you're going to see a snap percentage at the end of the season that's like 45%, like 40 to 45%. And it's going to be like, why did that not produce any fantasy points? And your answer is just going to be in all the things that we've been saying: the quarterbacks, the offense, the wide receivers, Scatabo, all those things are just going to result in Tracy not getting fantasy
It's
points.
just all bad. I mean, realistically, when you look at it, it's just all bad. Meanwhile, for me, I think my last loser, is someone who things are definitely not all bad, but is someone who I'm a little bit hesitant to really go for moving forward, and that's Jakobi Meyers. Jakobi Meyers is someone who had a career season with Las Vegas last year. He had over 1,000 yards. He had career highs in receptions. He had career high in yards. Everything about Meyers' season was very good, and that was something you couldn't really say about anyone else in Las Vegas besides Brock Bowers last year when it comes to the Raiders. I mean, they were just terrible, right? But now you have the situation where Bowers is still there, and he is the wide receiver one. It's not Jakobi
Hell
Meyers,
yeah.
right? Bowers is phenomenal. There were games where he was targeted 15, 16, 17, even 18 times in a football game, right? Bowers is that guy. So you put that aside, and now you have Jakobi Meyers, who this offense is completely changing. Pete Carroll comes in. They draft Genty, sixth overall, and then they drafted Beck in the second round. You have all these moving pieces in Las Vegas, and it just feels like they're doing these things to kind of get Meyers out of there and have some enough value to really hold in the situation with the Las Vegas offense. And hear me out, right? Meyers is going to be on a contract year. They can get what they need out of him for next season um, in PPR formats. He gets a good season in redraft. Like Myers can still be a very good receiver next year, but moving forward, I think his outlook for dynasty formats is really bleak because I don't think the Raiders re-sign him, and then it all depends on where he goes. But I think this offense is moving towards really focusing on Bowers and Genty and some of the young guys coming in, and I don't know if Myers is really in the position to do well in the long term.
Interesting. I got to push back on you a little bit here, Gabe. I'm going to be honest, where I think that Jakobi Meyers, I like what you said about the contract year, and that's certainly, there's a lot of questions as to what this Raiders team is going to look like. But the way that I kind of see Jakobi Meyers is he had somewhat of a breakout in a really bad offense. And like you mentioned, Brock Bowers already saw a ton of targets. So the way that I see that going is Brock Bowers is going to get his. He's going to get his, but I don't think he's going to get more targets than he was already being given per game at the ends of last season. So when Jakobi Meyers was still all that. The way that I see Jack Bash is a really good complementary piece to Jakobi Meyers. Jakobi Meyers is a PPR route running guy. Jack Bash is not exactly that guy. Jack Bash is probably going to be more of a touchdown red zone machine. That's the way that I kind of envision him fitting into this Raiders program. And with Pete Carroll coming in, they're probably going to run the ball all the time. And that is where I see Jakobi Meyers dropping off a little bit. I don't think he's going to have nearly as good of a season as he had last season, but I would certainly expect Jakobi Meyers to come in with a quarterback upgrade in Geno Smith to be a, low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 this year in redraft, which I think can be really, really valuable for your fantasy teams in best ball formats, wherever you're looking. I think Jakobi Meyers is a decent bet later on in draft because you can kind of get him at a steal. But you're certainly right when you talk about dynasty formats where Jakobi Meyers, this might be the last chance you have to sell him off at somewhat of a high. And that could be a really, really lucrative move if you can get a second round pick for Jakobi Meyers and get a little bit younger. That might be something that fantasy managers are looking to do.
My only concern comes from the fact that Myers broke out and finished as the wide receiver 19 in PPR formats. That's a very good
Wow.
number, right? That is a very solid wide receiver too. And
He could finish 28 though,
sure, but that's okay, right? If you're getting him at
It's a good
that
season.
value, that 28 to 30, like what you talked about, in that range, whatever that may look like, that's fine. As long as you're paying
Mm-hmm.
that price. But I don't
Yeah.
go out and pay the wide receiver 20 price for Jakobi Meyers when this offense is completely different. And even if their quarterback situation is better, you know for sure that with Genty, they're going to be running the ball way more. Maybe it does open up some things for Myers, but If you're paying that wide receiver 20 price, I just don't think he's going to get that for you this season, because that breakout season for me is a mix of, okay, Meyers is talented, but really how elite is he? And I just don't see him getting any better from that breakout year, which is why I think that Meyers overall is a loser moving forward.
I love it, Gabe. I think you are on to something there. All right, Brainiacs, that is going to do it today for all of our NFL draft winners and losers. First and foremost, I want to thank our very own Gabriel Sisarica for joining us today. It was a great pleasure. We hope to see you on so much more. We know we will in the near future. This is going to be a fun-filled fantasy summer. We're so excited at LeatherBrainz for everything that is coming up soon. Stay tuned, Brainiacs. Until then, like and follow on all of our social media at LeatherBrainz on YouTube, X, and Spotify. Until next time, we're out.
3, 2, 1.
Got a blast!
Thanks for checking out the Fantasy Brains. Don't miss next week's episode, Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. See you next week, Brainiacs.